We're going to be talking a little bit about the intelligence migration. Now, Grant is incredibly proficient when it comes to issues involving tech, but also he wrote a very long and lengthy article called The Great Migrations, which you can go read at griffinreview.com.
It's one of my favorite ones to reread, too. Like,
Yeah.
I actually enjoy that piece and that topic.
Absolutely. So what we would like to do now is talk a little bit about an intelligence aspect that involves an advantage that machines have over people. So Grant, why don't you take us away?
Yeah. Well, before we get started, actually, I have a surprise. We're going to talk about some recent issues that I found in the news.
Awesome. Let's go.
Because talking about the news is always good. And this is talking about the growth of microchips in the semiconductor decade, a $1 trillion industry. We could agree that we use microchips, semiconductors, computers in every single freaking aspect of our lives. It's
Absolutely.
difficult for me to get through a day without using my device or connecting to the internet or some type of processing. Hell, even this operation we're doing right now with Griffin Review, we're using cameras, we're using lights, we're using microphones, we're using this processing to parse through the data, which is incoming, and put it out in a refined form.
There's over a dozen semiconductors just right here in like a 2-meter area.
Oh, more.
Yeah, I'm just saying at least.
Yeah. But the point being is that as we go forward, we being humanity, into this fourth industrial revolution we're in the middle of right now, this is a revolution whose fuel is not oil, as we saw in the third industrial revolution, but is data. And importantly, the most valuable version of that is refined data. And so having items which can take in large amounts of data, whittle it down or refine it into something usable, i.e. audio, visual, all this different data, but whittling it down into one stream out to YouTube, for instance, that's a valuable process. And it's brought to you in part by, made possible by semiconductors and processors. Now, to prelude into this, I want to talk about the exponential evolution of the chip, of microchips.
Absolutely.
There's this thing called Moore's Law, and it was written or defined by Gordon Moore, who is the founder of the Intel Corporation, I want to say in like 65, in which he noticed that the number of transistors on a circuit board were doubling every decade, or every year. They were doubling every year. Now, when you have these transistors closer to each other, not only can there be more of them, but because the distance between them is shorter, the electrical charge takes less time to get from one to the other, which makes it faster. And when you have more of them and it's faster, you can design and build ones that are also smaller and also faster. So this just this vicious cycle, this incredible loop upward. And this has led to an exponential, not linear growth, but exponential growth of the microchip industry or microchip production. Which brings us to where we are today, where they permeate nearly every aspect of our lives and are incredibly fast, incredibly powerful, and can handle large loads of data. Having said that, we don't have enough of them. Like, I'm sure you heard in the past year and a half, 2 years, there's like this chip shortage going around. And one of the biggest contributors to that is the automotive industry. Everybody wants a smart, not smart car, but a smart automobile.
Right.
Whether it be, a driving assistant or self-driving vehicles, or vehicles which recognize and verify that you just got into the car and allows it to turn on and drive, rather than if somebody tried to turn it on but your personal device's fingerprint wasn't there, it wouldn't turn on, right? So that's one of the bigger drivers, pun intended, of the semiconductor industry, of the growth which is going to occur.
Okay.
So as it stands right now, or the study from 2021, said that the market, like the value of the industry of microchips was about $590 billion. In 2030, we can expect that to be about $1,065 billion. Almost, that's about double growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty light estimate. I see it being greater. Now, the greatest contributors to that is, first of all, that's going to be, the biggest growth is from automotive electronics, right?
Right.
Let me see if I can get an image on screen, because I know I have one for this.
Now, while you're doing that, if I can
Please.
just ask you real quick, just to clarify.
Uh-huh.
When you're talking about semiconductors, are you talking about the number of semiconductors produced, or are you talking about the quality improvement of semiconductors contributing to this fiscal increase?
Both.
Okay. and which more than the other? If you know, I know I'm splitting hairs at this point, but the question really is like to play what's a larger driver of change and innovation in the industry?
Here, wait a second. What we've got on screen right now, I'll come back to that.
Of course.
What I've got on screen for you guys right now is a graph of the change which is occurring in the industry, where we're going to look at. Now you can see that the biggest growth comes from that third bar up. That's automotive electronics, 13% compounded annual growth rate between now and 2030, because we need those things. Everybody wants a vehicle that has these items in them. All right. The second biggest growth rate is going to be industrial electronics, but that's not the biggest vertical. The other biggest verticals are computing and data storage, because we want faster computers. We want to be able to intake and process more data. We want to be the winners of the fourth industrial revolution. And the second biggest one is wireless communication, and this is just 5G communications, being able to process data faster. But you can see this huge growth, which makes me really interested in companies that are producing microchips and semiconductors, because they are going to be, they're the guys who are selling pickaxes and spades during the gold rush.
Right. But
which is a pretty apt analogy, I believe.
At the same time, though, one thing that we should kind of distinguish is that there's a difference in quality of semiconductors produced by each country, and that could be a security risk moving forward.
Sure.
Sorry not to nerd out too hard for a moment, but just that different countries produce different levels of semiconductors. The highest quality ones are produced in the United States, produced in Taiwan, even some are produced in Japan, and a few are now being produced in the European Union.
Yeah.
The mid-tier ones are being produced in Thailand, Vietnam, you're talking, Southeast Asian countries, and then the lowest quality semiconductors are largely being produced by China in mass. So the question is there going to be a larger need for high quality semiconductors, medium, low quality semiconductors? Like, where do you see this moving forward?
Yeah.
Which variety?
It's going to be personal preference of like buying a Lexus versus buying a Toyota, or a Honda or something. Like, do you want something that's going to be powerful and effective, or that's going to get the job, just kind of get the job done, but is reliable?
Of course.
But in general, if you're trying to be at the cutting edge of your field and you're trying to be the best processor that you can be, time is an advantage. And even more so is time of processing data. Let's say you have let's talk for a self-driving car for a moment. It's going to have little LiDAR sensors around it to tell you if there's other cars near, or to sense like a lane change.
Right.
If you have shitty chips on there, it's going to take more than like a second to process that.
Right.
And that might be the difference between life and death of an auto accident. But if you have the high quality ones, that's a fraction of a second where it can process that vast amount of data pouring in through the LiDAR sensors.
So it seems like
one example.
If I can just clarify sort of what your position is, as I understand it.
Those who do it well, highly sought after.
Right. And for these, it seems like more of the computing and data storage, wireless communication, automotive electronics, areas that require fast, high-quality transmission of data are going to require the higher quality chips, whereas maybe you'll see lower quality chips in industrial,
your toaster,
consumer. Exactly. Your smart toaster. You don't really...
Your smart toaster.
You don't need an Intel chip for your smart toaster. It's just not required. So
unless you want the best toaster that a toaster can be, you want a brave little toaster.
He's doing his utmost. But it just seems like each individual field, as far as I understand from what you're saying, is going to require a different type of chip moving forward in larger productions of those certain kinds of chips.
Yeah, and it all comes down to the amount of data you're processing and how fast you want it done. Accuracy is usually pretty spot on, but it's about volume and time at this point. Yeah. But this is just an industry I wanted to give you guys some numbers on, because it's one I'm interested in, and I could we'll probably revisit it. I talked about this in my episode 2 days ago in This Week in Charts. You can check that out on my channel on Grant Culture Productions. But with that, I think it's about time that we move into talking about the intelligence migration, and I'm going to